Good morning and welcome to everyone who's joined us for this 8th session, which is part of this lecture series on emerging architects in South Asia. Thank you for being with us. And today we have an architect from Nepal and an architect from Sri Lanka who are going to share their work. The first presentation is going to be by Studio Neba, and the second one from Kosala from Sri Lanka. But before that, I want to, as I always do, thank everyone who's sort of been involved, not only in participating. We've already had 14 speakers in this series, which has been very exciting. We've all learned a lot, and I think it has become the beginnings of the creation of, I think, in some ways, a community of young architects across the region, which is incredibly exciting and interesting as we go along. I also want to thank the Lakshmi Mittal South Asia Institute for all their support, especially Hitesh Hathi and Selman Rafi. Ela Singhal from the Architecture Foundation, but most importantly, the South Asia Students Group at the GSD at Harvard University, Pranav, Dhruv, Devashri, Rolo, Amna, and Eshna. Eshna, who's going to be on the panel today at the end of the talks for the discussion. So we're going to follow the usual format where we'll have each presenter speak for 25 minutes. I will intervene at 25 to give you the last 4 or 5 minutes in case you're going over, so excuse me for that. And then we will, hopefully get about 25 minutes or 30 minutes for discussion, which is always, and sometimes not always, but most often the most interesting part of the morning and evening for you in South Asia. So our first speaker is Sagar Chitrakar, Studio Neba is the group that he works with. It's a collective. They are about 7 architects, but they engage in multidisciplinary work where they engage all sorts of other collaborators. And they're based in Nepal, and their aspiration is to create diversity, form, structure, while also connecting and honoring local heritage. And I think that'll be an interesting part, I hope, of the discussion of how you see those connections. And their work is a mixture of residential and commercial architecture and lifestyle objects that, in their words, inspire the senses and encourage mindful living. Their emphasis is on natural materials, local crafts, quality, and they aspire for a timeless, warm, and honest aesthetic. Kosala from Sri Lanka is a graduate of the University of Moratuwa and later became an associate member of the Sri Lankan Institute of Architects. He's also a chartered member of the Royal Institute of British Architects, and it's a Colombo-based multidisciplinary architectural practice which has presence in the historic city of Gaul. We focus and, the firm focuses on applying design, creativity, and technological, feasible, economical, environmentally sustainable creations, in their words. Kosala has also been teaching, and he contributes as an architecture faculty at the University of Moratuwa and the City School of Architecture as a visiting lecturer. They have been recognized in Sri Lanka as among a young firm and a young group. The Sri Lankan Institute of Architects has awarded them in 2020 and 2022 to recognize their work. So we really look forward to these presentations. Sagar, you go first, and Kosala, you can follow after he's done. Thank you.
Hi there, everyone. I'm representing Studio Neba, and we're just sharing the work that we have done in the past, and the main thing is like how we got here till now. So this will be a series of work and the background of our studio. So we are a very small design and architecture studio based out of Nepal. Currently, we have 17 members as of now. So just to give a little bit of a background of myself. So I studied in Pulcher campus from 2007 to 2011. At first, I did not know why I studied architecture, because I was fond of sketching and a little bit of math. But when in the first day I had this vivid memory on the teachers asking all my friends and why they studied architecture. They had this like dreamy sayings on like, I always wanted to be an architect or all of that stuff. But in my case, I had nothing, to be honest. But then I went in that path and here I am till now. So these are just some of the projects that was out of the college. So, as you can see in the second one, it was a residential project where we had to come with a basic residential building with no guidelines. And then at one point, I was playing with the Rubik's Cube, and the house was a representation of the Rubik's Cube. And then I experimented on how the different forms could be tallied from the Rubik's Cube itself. And yeah, so these are some of the projects that I did with a group of friends in fourth year and the final year in the thesis. So right out of the college, I volunteered at Habitat for Humanity for a year, where I had this like real life site experience working with natural materials such as mud, and we were doing houses for in rural areas, basically. And then again, there was this project called Hariya Chok by Satya Group, in which I worked as a volunteer, then as a project coordinator. In this project, we wanted to explore different ideas on how we can have this urban green space in a very, concrete city like Kathmandu. And this is quite interesting. And then I also applied for grad school in the same year. And as you can see in the second one, there is also GST Harvard, among all of the documents with this very peculiar name there, because I wanted to keep track of, have I done my portfolio, because every university had like different requirements and formats, GRE and all of that. Yeah, but I did not get admitted to GST, but here I am talking with teachers and students from GST, and it's quite the whole circle, I guess, and it's a quite interesting thing that I'm sharing here. And then again, I was looking for different jobs, thinking that my portfolio would suffice to get into all of this like top top architecture firms all over the world. And then here you can see like 35 plus architecture folders in which I literally kept all these different names and files to apply. And guess what? I didn't get admitted to like any one of them. It was just this like kind of auto reply saying that you are not admitted, or like you are not hired, or like all of that. So that's an interesting journey right out of my college. So after that, I joined a local architecture company in Neba, in Mathema & Partners, where I imagined that as an architect, you would be doing like, design and mostly working out of the creativity things. But all I did was drawings for one whole year. So it was all like Revit, like detailed drawings, construction drawings, and all of that. So it was all for one whole year. And then the earthquake happened in 2015. So this was quite a turning moment, I guess, in my architecture journey, in where at one point I was designing villas and resorts for people from different backgrounds. But then when the earthquake happened in that night, let me just get this thing outside. Is it audible? Hello?
Yes, you're still audible.
Yeah, so at this point, in the night of an earthquake, we had to sleep outside because there was still like tremors going on. And then at that point, we had this plastic tarp, which I wanted to, tie some knots and make it a tent, but then I just could not do it. And then, at one point I was like working as an architect with 5 years of education, and I could not even tie a tent to shelter from the rain during the earthquake. So that was a very, a thought-provoking thing that happened. And I kind of questioned myself on what architecture is and how I could use my expertise
in the field of architecture. So I decided to join this one organization in which we were doing like post-earthquake rebuilding all over Nepal with like tents. And then we were doing like permanent shelters out of rammed earth. We designed like schools, and we talked with Nepalese government on how the rebuilding should go on. And then kind of again remodeling of the whole village itself with like sustainable local materials rather than rebuilding out of steel and concrete itself. So in 2016, I took a one-way flight to Bali. At that time, to be honest, I did not know where Bali was. It was not that famous at that time with all this social media. So I just had this opportunity to go to Bali. As you can see in the photos, that was how I packed a one-way flight to Bali. And in this place with Alexis Dornier, I worked for 3 years. And at this point, I had this creative freedom, as well as, guidance on how the architecture could do. Somehow we were kind of aligned in our thought process and design, and I led some of these projects when I was in Bali for 3 years. So in 2019, kind of again, I decided to come back and I started Studio Neba. So Studio Neba stands for Nepal and Bali, in which it has some of the rooted connection on where I stayed for certain years of my life, and then again, a place where I belonged. So I started a company thinking that I was an architect and I could run my own things. But then I realized I needed someone who can draft. I needed a draftsperson. I need someone who could do renders. So I needed someone to design a website for us, or for me. And then the list goes on. And then there was like admin guy, this account guy, this project manager, and basically we needed someone who could do everything. So I decided to hire myself to fill all the gaps, because running a company and hiring everyone was not financially feasible at that part of the time. So now we have a group of 8. So we have like Samir, Sinchan, Angel, Ansu, Sagar, and Sneha. Some has been with us for almost 3 or 4 years. Some have recently joined, and we have one more, Leah, like our dog, but she's still very small as of now, and we could not take a photo of her because she's like playful and all that time. So we have this whole team as of now, who are like Studio Neba team. So today we are doing a basic 4 projects roundup on how we got the project, different scale of project, and in different locations till now. So first is a project in Bali. It's called Terraces. This was one of the first project right out of Alexis Dornier. When I decided to leave that job, which was paying me good. So I left for that job, and then like I started my own thing, and then I was approached to design a 5-bedroom villa in Bali, which was actually in the middle of a rice field. So that's why the project is called Terraces, because it was on the rice field terraces. So in that part, the very first thing was very doubtful, you start your own firm, and then like there is no one which you can lean on or rely on. So you're on your own. So there were like a lot of doubtful moments on, whether you can pull this off or not. And then another constraint was like, I was out of Bali, during the middle of the project. I came back to Nepal. So all of the drawings, all of the details had to be done remotely. And the site was very constrained, and it was only accessible through motorbike. So even all the doors, even the windows, they have to be of right sizes so that they could be transported with only scooters at that time. It took a while. There was COVID, there was lockdown, and after 3 years, the project is complete. I haven't had a chance to go and visit the place, but hopefully this year, I'm planning to go there and see how the project turned out. The next one is Pokhara Villas. So this is also one of the first project that we got approached when we came back to Nepal. So this is a project in western side of Nepal. It's in Pokhara. So we got approached to design like multiple villas in a serene mountainous site. And then the first, I also clearly remember that like when we went for the site visit, the client asked, like how much would you charge? And at that point, I had no idea on like, should you charge square foot? Should you charge lump sum? So I had no kind of idea at that time. And we slowly built up the project. As you can see on the second part, there were like multiple sketching that was done, which could correlate to the contour of the existing site. We played through multiple iteration. And then we came up with this 2 BHK residential villa, which is like one, and in the master plan, there will be like multiple units of this place. So of this villa. So even in this part, there was like COVID, there was lockdown. So it was only me and Samir in this time, like we were working remotely, passing through the files and doing all the details and design. And then this is another project. It's the workspace. So this was an interesting project because for this project, we had to study all the rules and regulation, all the bylaws, all the rules that governs us, what to build, how high to build, and what would be the entire footprint of the building that is like allowed by the local government. So in this project, we had this design drill session, which went on for, I guess, almost a year, where we were changing design just to get the maximum footprint and the maximum coverage, because this was located in a very prime commercial building. So in this project, we were able to achieve something which is a commercial building, specially catered for the office, but also we wanted to create an office building in which it was inviting for the people working there, which is not just like a typical workspace with cubicles. And since it was facing the south side, we designed it in a way that there were like louvers which could be transitioned and like had some shade within the space. So this is another project which is ongoing. So this is an interior project for Daraz, which is one of the largest e-com business in Nepal. We were approached to design this 3-story interior design for this project. And at first, we had to sit with, this individuals like head of departments of the company, just to know what were their needs for, because every department had different needs. And we haven't done a project of this scale, but also we had the knowledge of the prior projects, so we could pull this off. So in this project, the transition time was very short from design to build. So we were also part of the site supervision and project management, where we had to learn these new skill sets and bring the project into the real life. And yeah, so currently it's in the final stage of finishing the project. And as you can see from the first photo and the last photo, we are at the, I would say few weeks until when we finish the project. So yeah, so as of now, we have like eight people that are like working, 7 people and 2 furry dogs. And these are all of our past, I would say, team members who have graduated from Studio Neba, and they are currently studying in their own universities, who were part of their interns, and some have gone abroad for their masters. So I think that's a very short presentation from my side, and that would be it, I guess.
as you finished so early, I thought I would just ask you a couple of questions so we can situate it before we go to Kosala.
Right.
You know, I mean, you started off by showing your interest in reconstruction and the earthquake and RAM. I mean, Bali seems to have taken you in a different direction. I'm just curious whether you are yet exploring some of those sort of challenges in Nepal.
Right. So, like I said, Bali was a very impromptu decision. Like just having this one-way flight ticket to Bali was something which I did out of just the gut feeling. And before that, yes, so the earthquake happened and it clearly changed the route on how I was like operating in doing architecture. And then when I went to Bali, I was exposed to all sort of, different materials on how they use, because they're like really great in their craftsmanship on wood and in stone and like all of that in details. So I had a great chance to, see the culture and learn from the natives as well. So that's something that I'm like planning and I'm doing to bring back to Studio Neba back in Nepal.
I see. But no opportunities to do that yet.
We are doing few projects here because I think there's a trend in Nepal for villas. So currently we have like 3-4 projects, I guess, which has a similar project typologies on how I worked in Bali. So currently we have few projects, and I guess like all the skill sets which I learned back there, I'm sharing openly with my team, and then we are, kind of implementing in our ongoing projects.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so Kosala, can you share your screen and go next? Thank you.
Hi, hope you can see the screen.
All good, thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. It's a great pleasure and privilege to speak in this platform. Thank you, Professor Rahul and the team. So in today's presentation, I will brief you a bit of where I live and the background of the country and a bit about my practice. And I will show you a few projects which we have tried to explore new concepts. Yeah, so Sri Lanka, formerly called as Ceylon, is an island nation in the Indian Ocean, southeast of the Indian subcontinent. It's in a strategic location near major Indian Ocean sea lanes. The nation has a total of around 65,000 square kilometers. And then Sri Lanka's climate includes tropical monsoons, northeast monsoon, and the southwest monsoon. Its terrain is mostly low, flat to rolling plain with mountains in the south central interior. Sri Lanka has a population around 22 million and is like a multinational state, home to diverse cultures, languages, and ethnicities. The Sinhalese are the majority of the nation population. The Tamils, a larger minority group, have also played an influential role in the history of Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka is documented history goes back around 3,000 years with evidence of prehistoric human settlements that dates back at least 125,000 years. The culture of Sri Lanka mixes modern elements with traditional aspects and is known for its regional diversity. So the Sri Lankan culture has long been influenced by the heritage of Theravada Buddhism passed on from India, and then history of colonial occupation. So the identities of Portuguese, Dutch, and British elements having intermingled with various traditional facets of Sri Lankan culture. So the country has a rich artistic tradition with distinct creative forms, encompass music, dance, visual arts, and architecture. Sri Lanka is full of natural wonders, from huge rocks in the middle of forest to herds of wild elephants and rolling hills. You'll find a wide range of ecosystems. There are coastal beaches, dry forests, rainforests. There are foggy hills and mountain ranges. There are lakes, big and small, and tons of tea plantation. Sri Lanka also has a rich history in architecture with influence of Indian, Portuguese, Dutch, and British architecture. And we grew up seeing works of great architects in the country as well. As you can see here, some of the great works of great architects in our time. So coming into the recent backgrounds of the country, we had 30 years of civil war, which ended up in 2009, which held back the development of the country. And in the recent past, we had a terrorist attack, and then the COVID pandemic resulted in a major economic breakdown in the country. So Sri Lanka is ranking the 73rd on Human Development Index. However, the ongoing economic crisis has resulted in collapse of the currency, rising inflation, and a humanitarian crisis due to severe shortage of essentials. It has also led to an eruption of street protests with citizens successfully demanding that the president and the government to step down. Here we are, but we still think we are a resilient nation. So we are doing an architecture practice in an era of a lot of instability and uncertainty happening in the country. So this is my team. Sorry about it. We are a small team, young and dynamic, trying to explore and enjoy the process of architecture. So in a way, trying to explore the theories we learned in School of Architecture. We don't follow, I think we don't follow any kind of such architectural languages. So if you see our projects like we do, we have done a lot of languages, a lot of styles, because every project is a new beginning for us. So we always try to make new concepts and then it's always a challenge for us. But going ahead, we always try to work under a policy. For this, I have inspired a lot by a manifesto written by architect Madura Premathilake, who was one of my mentors. I'll explain a little bit what the policies we go through for every project. So one is starting with build less. So we always try to build less, slim the program, build on less, reduce the footprint, grow trees, and build in and out, dissolve barriers between inside and outside, bring history to life, and adaptive reuse. So use of reused materials and spaces wherever possible. Build robust, let's go ruin gracefully, reduce the need for maintenance, and build on what's left over, adapt the existing, bring history to life. Build safe, not sterile. So we need to kill hazard, but we don't have to kill the joy. And finally, build interim, affordable now, grow later. So with the situation, I think these are kind of policies we need to adhere with the situation of the country as well. Okay, so that's about a little bit of background of us. I will, explain small projects, very small projects, 3 projects, which we think it's kind of a different approach, what we have took. So going into the first one. So Helium is a design studio which provides advertising and printing solutions. So this project was completed in end of 2019. It's a project is a renovation of a studio office at Colombo, Sri Lanka. The approach was to transform a typical building space. So this is the space to a unique design studio while giving an eye-catching character to the interior and exterior. So the building was situated on a busy street in Colombo. So as you can see here, this was the situation before the renovation, before the transformation. So the building was on rent, and so my client is actually one of my friends. So he had rented the building, and he has a lot of uncertainty with the economy. So he didn't want to spend much on the project, and he has doubts of sustaining the business as well. So if the things not work out, so have to shut it off and go. So something like that mentality this project started. So to overcome this challenge, we wanted to come up with a concept which is low cost and of course dismantleable as well. So for this, the material palette plays a major role in making the concept as well. We found these GI, reused GI pipes, used wooden pallets, as the client had a construction arm as well. So what we did was introduce, a new facade to cover the existing. As you can see here, we didn't try to remake the facade, but we just cover the facade with another kind of a facade, which act as a double skin as well. So these used GI pipes, reused wooden pallets, and plants on the outer skin. So makes a perfect synthesis, creating a unique facade for exterior and interior. So a warm ambience is created through the use of materials against heavy fixed structure of the neighborhood. So as you can see here, the ground floor was like a printing shop, printing area, but upper floor was the design studio. So we were paid much attention on the upper floor. So this is the final outcome. I'll explain a bit. So the grid facade with plants inside creates the perfect harmony and makes the building stand out well from the urban chaos. As you can see here, you was seeing the old picture. So it was like a little bit of a chaotic street, but we want to create some kind of a grid, so which takes the attention to the passers by. Yeah, this is the transformation from the what it was to now, from the interior and the exterior. So that is how it looks. So the entrance is highlighted with an exposed brick entryway, and the facade extends to the interior. So the interior layout is done in such a way that the main axis of the space is celebrated and connected with other spaces around. The main axis is highlighted by this green path, introducing a new ceiling, and the greenery was spread throughout. So all the workstations are made out of GI structure, which connect to each other, and each of them facilitate with individual storage spaces as well. So each workstation consists of custom-made light fittings and electrical lines. So as you can see there are electrical lines exposed with colored PVC pipes and then the colorful GI structure connects all spaces together while giving a unique thematic character. So the existing plastered walls were exposed, and the graphics on brick walls makes kind of a synthesis with the other environment. So we have created this seating area made out of the GI structure as well. It's creating a waiting area for customers, as well as gathering space for office staff when they are free. Yeah, so these are the same, the seating area, and the right side is the working areas. So you can see the details of light fittings, the GI structure, it's kind of all together connected, everything connected together. So the behind you see is the boardroom. The partitioning of the boardroom is done with the same concept. The exposed colorful GI structure with clamps and the exposed electrical grid with pine wood add a unique touch to the interior. So, so in a busy, chaotic environment, I think this building stands out, showing a unique character. So that's what we wanted. I think we have done it in some way. End of the day, so as a advertising firm, they got a lot of recognition after this upliftment. So the clients are very happy, and I think we have done some kind of a reasonable input to them. Okay, I'll go for the next project. So this is I call as Kosi's canvas. So this is kind of okay, this is a residence, but it signifies in a few ways. That's why I wanted to present this. So one thing is it's a residence, but the client is being myself. It's not a typical house as such, and I'm not being the client with a lot of wealth. So each and every decision was taken to make the project low cost. This was completed in 2019. It's a small house around 2,600 square foot. It has a house, few visitor bedrooms, and the design studio. So the significance of the project is that I wanted to create a dialogue among the public to change the way they think about a typical house, especially in Sri Lanka. Usually Sri Lankans build a house for few generations, made with, they made it with brick and concrete. They build it for their children, grandchildren as well. So I think this might be a bit related to the South Asian context as well. So, but here in Sri Lanka, with the given situations, the crises we are going through, the economic conditions, a lot of newly married couples struggle for lifetime to pay the debts they took for their houses. So and they still can live maximum 30 to 40 years if they build the house in their 30s. So why do that? So I wanted to give a little, create a little dialogue, make an eye opener for people. So that was one of the ideas behind the project as well. So without thinking of typical materials and standards, I have tried, experiment new structural systems and materials. So the site is at the edge of a large water body surrounded by lush greenery. The extent of the site is 8.8 perches. Yeah, so this is where the building is right now. So the design approach focuses on getting perfect synthesis with nature while reducing the barriers between inside and outside. Most importantly, with the budget constraints we had, making it low cost as possible was a major challenge. This house has 2 wings. The right side wing is for architecture studio and the renting rooms, while the left wing caters as home for both of us. So the renting room in a way, I didn't want to make it just a house where I created few rooms where I can give out for Airbnb, which covers some of my investment. So the trees, so this is the upper floor where I have the design studio, and left side is the bedroom. There's another visitor's bedroom on top of the studio. So the structural system wanted to create so it was most the structural was done out of steel. So I wanted to get the lowest possible HI and as possible to make it lightweight as possible. So the structural design was done in such a way that, it counterbalance the whole structure, which ends up with using smaller sections. So this is how it looks. So the trees, floor patterns, wooden deck and veranda with the landscape creates an entrance pathway towards the colorful main door. So interiors are very simple and minimal to create a frame that capture the vistas. The wide opening make the natural nature blend into inside and maximize the natural light and ventilation. So this is the where we have taken the outside view inside kind of thing. So the dining and pantry, which connected to living, extend out as timber decks on both ways. And then also the dining table and pantry top extends further as a bar counter as well. Yeah, and there's a lot of outdoor spaces. So we have minimized the inside spaces and a lot of semi outdoor spaces and cantilevered spaces to minimize the footprint. So the most of the superstructure was done with steel sections and exposed bricks were used in few areas. So these cantilevered spaces, and the transparent materials blurs the distinction line between indoors and outdoors, while the skin of the building varies in different areas. To get the maximum view, we have used glass as folding and sliding windows, but wherever the ventilation is necessary, we have used reclaimed wooden windows and louvered panels. And also the exterior skin, we did it out of with some reclaimed roofing sheets, which we tried it everywhere in this project. Yeah, so these are we try to use materials as honest as possible to keep them exposed. This is one bedroom on the ground floor. The top, as the ceiling you have seen, is a lightweight concrete deck, steel deck, and the exposed bricks. So this is the studio space, which is again few samples. We have done it here. We have done for other projects, and this is the kind of studio space, like a multi-purpose space for the studio. And this is bedrooms. All the interior, we have got pallets, reuse pallets for do the interiors as well, which but every space capture the view outside. So this is the master bedroom. So it's really open. It wanted to create just my way. I mean, I haven't think about much of standards, but where I comfortable with. Yeah. I have a short video. I try to play it. Hope it will work. Yeah, so that's about it. And I will, yeah. So I have another small project which I wanted to show you. I hope I have time.
Yeah. If you could take 5 or 7 minutes, that will be great.
Yeah, I can do it in 5 minutes.
Thank you.
So this is again a very small project. Call it Paint Shop, 2,000 square foot. It's in Dehiwala, which is one of the busiest town in Colombo. So as you can see here, we were assigned to do a paint shop and kind of a hardware store, which is alongside of the Go Road, which is a really kind of a chaotic streetscape. And so the building is, we were committed to do the ground floor of this building as a paint shop. It's a long, narrow strip. So commercial projects, a lot of clients have the uncertainty of what happens. So we had to cater to that. For that also, so we had to come up with kind of a different concept. So what we came up with as concept is like, if you see a day-to-day hardware, we see usually it has a lot of clutter. So what we need to create was, we wanted to create a little order within the clutter itself. And then this particular order, I mean, it has to experience by whoever the users, the staff and the customers. So we created a pathway to experience this order within this clutter. So that was the concept. For that, we have used whatever the materials we can use it from the store itself. Checker plates, wooden, GI pipes, roofing sheets, scaffolding decks, empty buckets of paint. So those kind of stuff. So this is the plan. It's a long, narrow strip, and we have created a pathway inside of that. So this is the transformation from exterior to interior. So what we actually wanted to create was, so as I said, the chaotic streetscape, we didn't want to make it like an alien building, but we wanted to do a highlight. So the highlight has to come up with the context itself. So we wanted to create this little bit of order within the chaos. So that was the whole concept. As we were commissioned to do the interior only, but we convinced the client to do the exterior as well. So actually he convinced because the usage of, very low cost materials. So we got this reclaimed roofing sheets, and we could convince the ground floor tenant and the upper floor tenant to do this thing. So exterior actually goes inside, and vice versa, the interior comes out, where there's a curiosity of you get a curiosity of passers by. So the order within chaos, you can see that all the shelves are adjustable, the racks are out of scaffolding plates, and then the separations are done with empty and new paint buckets itself. So this is the pathway which creates the experience through to the corner of the building. The ceiling is done in a rustic way, but the colorful GI pipes create the order within the rustic environment, rustic and the chaotic environment. Yeah, this is the like the oval. We have created like a little pose. You can reach to all of the products, and you can see the whole product range when you come to this space. So it's like a pose in the spatial progression. And the details, so we have used whatever the things we can use from the store itself. So and created this kind of a vibe which ultimately, it's kind of recognized whoever, and it's kind of has become an icon of this on the street. Yeah, so that's about it. That's like few approaches what we have gone through. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Kosala. Can you just stop sharing?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much. So let me just start with just some comments and observations, and then we'll get into questions. There's already one question for Sagar, which is actually articulating what I was going to ask much better. So I will read it out in a bit. But Kosala, thank you very much for your presentation, and Sagar, you too. Sagar, I already offered some comments and I will add some, but Kosala, I just want to pick up with just responses to what you've done. First of all, I mean, I think, congratulations on very thoughtful work. It's small scale, but it's incredibly sensitive in the way you take the notion of repair, reuse. It's a form of conservation also. It's recycling, reuse, repair, everything coming together in a formulation. I think that resonates, and that I think is very relevant as an approach for a lot of us in South Asia, and all of us in South Asia, because, I think what Sri Lanka is experiencing currently in the context of your own practice in the last few years that you've started, it forces us to think more frugally about things, but frugally both in the sense of the usage of material, but also in terms of the aesthetic message that it sends out, because sometimes aesthetics also create polarization, right? When you have the glass block in the middle of an ordinary landscape, it's a form of polarization. Whereas I think what you're demonstrating, which I commend and I'm really very inspired by, is that you are using ordinary recycled, reused material, scaffolding in sophisticated ways, that these buildings, to use your words, stand out in the chaos, but yet are not alien objects. They are made from the everyday materials that people use. And I think that creates a softness in another way, and an integration, both aesthetically, but also in terms of intent. And I think the other thing that struck me was, that one house you showed in passing in your earlier projects, where you said, let's build affordable now and grow later, which is, again, I think a very important message, because I could argue that attitude also finds its way into these other projects that you've done, is why invest so many resources right now if you're not sure, let's, leave it for later. And there's a kind of embedded aspiration towards incrementalism, which again is an incredibly relevant idea for us to inform our design thinking in South Asia, where we don't lock all our resources into absolute solutions, but rather into thinking more in terms of transitions, which is why I think the project that we are undertaking here is called the Architectures of Transition, for that reason. And I think I was delighted to see that you demonstrated many of those issues that we are very much, wanting to address there. I'm sure there'll be other questions, and I will wait to ask you questions. But I just have one last comment, which is the house. We are not wanting to discuss homes and private villas so much in this series, because we're trying to see what is the public agency of architects and your generation of architects in South Asia. But again, I was quite delighted to see the house for two reasons. One was it's consistent with everything else you're doing. So it's interesting how from the paint shop to the advertising office, to the house, they're consistent values. And the house, in a sense, is an armature, which is to say that it breaks away from all the business as usual images of the home, the business as usual, and creates a spatial formulation using a kind of container aesthetic with reused materials for cladding, reused doors, windows. And it could be anything. I could have seen that as a community center. I could have seen that as a small office. I could have seen. So you almost dissolve the type of the house in a sense to make attitude towards spatial occupation on a site, right? So I think that is something that's worth us collectively articulating as a way to approach the reusability of things, etc. So those are just my comments, and I'm sure there'll be questions from Eshna and from others in the audience, and there are many things to discuss with, but thank you for sharing that. So Sagar, I'm going to go back to you. In fact, you've left me thinking, because your trajectory is very interesting and very unusual. Starting with all the rejections to all the universities, which we can set up another Zoom call to discuss. I don't want to get into that right here. To, suddenly realizing that you couldn't tie a canvas over your head and getting into hardcore, on the ground. How do you do it? How do you create habitation? How do you respond to earthquakes? How do you make rammed earth walls? How do you work with your hands? From that, you jump to Bali, and then you start doing, offices and all sorts of almost global kinds of programs, right? Villas. Then you come back to Nepal. I'm just sort of curious to know what's going through your head. Are you going to bring Bali to Nepal, or are you going to find a new Nepal after your experience in Bali? And so having framed it in that way, no, and, I think, each of us take our own time to find our paths, right? And that is related to the context and the situation. And clearly, you even the title of your practice has both Nepal and Bali. Will it dissolve into something else, or will it be always Nepal and Bali, or will Bali overtake Nepal, or Nepal overtake Bali, or will we come up with a third kind of option? So based on that, there's a question. And I'm just going to pose that question to you. It's a question from Sandeep Boghadi. He says, congratulations, Sagar, for a crisp presentation. Most of your work draws inspiration from Bali. Is there a regional Nepalese identity the practice aspires to? Not just visual, but maybe the underlayers like local craftsmanship or materials, climate, etc. Are there instances you've used in your project? Or is it a deliberate vocabulary you choose to produce a more global architecture in regards to an identity? It's a very beautifully articulated question. Thank you, Sandeep, for that. So, Sagar, why don't you start responding, and then we'll go to Kosala.
Right. So I think it's all about trusting the process as of now. Like, there has not been any direct thought process on whether the project should be a reflection of Bali or like Nepal per se. In terms of Nepal, in my kind of opinion, there was a very great deal of like architecture, but it was only in the past, so whatever was like great architecture, it has been in the past. For me, it's very hard to find any inspiration when I walk down in the streets of Kathmandu, because it's all like concrete buildings. So I sometimes when I stroll down these UNESCO World Heritage sites, these are the places where I get the inspiration. But having said that, I also don't want to replicate even the fragments of the things from there, because they are not the reflection on how it should be done at this stage of time. Because of course, like we have kind of clients who have fond memories of, or like fantasies of like these old buildings with very intricate details of doors and windows. But in my kind of opinion, those would not reflect this current time. So we don't do architecture that's like I would say the mix, like a mix of then and now, but rather try to find these small fragments. Maybe it's in the uses of the materials, when we say materials, it can be woodwork, it can be brickwork, and all of that sort. So having said that, in terms of local craftsmanship, to be honest, we have a very hard time finding a great deal of craftsmanship from here in local. Maybe I haven't had the luck of finding them, but recently we have a group of these artisans, but they are all based out of India, so they moved here, and then they are working in our carpentry work and the home renovation and home building. So yeah, so that would be my kind of answer. But then at the same time, we are not also looking for a global design trend, or because nowadays sometimes the requirements of the clients would be like Instagrammable or all sort of things, and like in
No. So no. Thank you. No, I just thank you for your response. But there are. I mean, this is. I hope this doesn't sound too pedagogical, but I'm going to use this opportunity to respond. Yes, I can see your struggle, right? So then there are the tangibles and the intangibles. The tangibles are the materials, the crafts, the details, right? The intangibles could be lifestyles, could be cultural aspirations, could be just the way people occupy space culturally in this socialize, what the courtyard meant in many parts of South Asia. So those are the kind of intangibles. And, one of the contributions that the first couple of generations, I would imagine I'm the third generation, you guys are the fourth generation of post-independent South Asia. The first generation did us a great service where they managed to abstract and articulate some of those intangibles into another kind of vocabulary, right? I mean, I even think now specifically, I mean, I can talk about India and Sri Lanka, and we know all the characters involved. But in Nepal, for example, one not very well known within the modern idiom was Karl Prussia, who came from Vienna in Germany and did some wonderful work. I remember as a student visiting Hotel Tarragon. I visited that in 1978, just when it was finished, and it blew my mind just in the way that he had managed to take modernism in that way and situate it in Nepal in a very particular way, right? And so, I mean, I don't know. Is that something that we see as a bygone? Has that got diluted as an aspiration? Why are we now 4 generations later not aspiring to some of that? I just wonder. Of course, the situation has changed politically, economically. I'm not expecting an answer from you. That's why I said I'm sorry if it sounds pedagogical, but I'm just putting it on the table because there is a tradition of how architects for 2 or 3 generations, even in Nepal, have extracted some of these lessons. And I just wonder what those struggles might be. And, I think having gone to Bali and come back with a kind of renewed energy that you seem to have, I would just be interested in seeing how and what you do in Nepal. And I hope some of these conversations help you think about things differently in Nepal too.
Right. So it's somewhat interesting because you mentioned Karl Prussia and the museum, and we had our studio there when we started. So that space is also very close to our heart because it was kind of nestled in a forest, So like, even though it took us like 1 hour to just go, but then when we were there, we had a very small space. It was in a small part, like a dome, and like then there was a circular window in which you could see like landscape outside. Mm-hmm. And then also you mentioned like at that time of an era, there was Louis Khan did one of the building here, and there was Kinzo Tange who did like in Lumbini, and I had a chance to visit that, and it just blew my mind, like how did they pull that off without even being on the site, constantly. And here, if you miss a site visit like for a day or 2, then things would be entirely different, and then we have all the tools that we need right now. We have internet, we have phone, but at that time it was all based out of papers with like, I don't even know how they communicated on site. And when we look at that museum, like, you could see all that small details, like, and it was only brick facade. So yeah, so it's a bit thought-provoking thing on how someone pulled the project off that big scale at that time. And here we are in the more modern era, and then,
Yeah, so we look forward to you pulling off other things in the future. Yeah, from all this learning. No. Okay, I'm going to move to Kosala. There's a rather pragmatic question, so I'll just start with that before I hand it over to Ishna. It says in Cozy's canvas, the poetic spaces you've created with the longitudinal rectangular forms and your emphasis on low cost and reuse of material. Did the idea of using containers come to your mind initially? And I think that there's another question from Dinesh. This was from Naila Ahmed, and is that in Cozy's canvas you talked on low cost throughout, but then the use of full glass shutters all around, didn't that cost very high?
Yeah, so I had like, so to start with, so I was thinking, okay, whether to do this as a container house or to do it kind of a steel structure. So did the foundation to, kind of, in a way, if I don't have, enough funds that can make it a little container, but then I realized, okay, using steel is much cheaper than using a container as well, and we can play a little bit more. So, actually the foundation was done to do anything. But then ended up with steel. Use of glass, of course. So as I said, so there are few areas where we have to use glass, because one thing so it's end of the day, it was one of, this might be the only house I'll build in my lifetime. So wanted to create, so being the client myself, so wanted to create this openness, living with the nature, but at the same time we want security as well and the safety. So I had used a little bit of glass, but comparatively I have reduced the cost of this house around 30 to 40% from a normal construction total.
Thank you. Thank you. Ishna, I'm going to hand it over to you for a round.
Thank you so much, Al. This was extremely inspiring to young professionals who are just kind of entering back into practice. That's how I would categorize myself. So the kind of aesthetic that you all bring to the work in terms of sensitivity to the material and the way you're reinventing, like Rahul said, the reuse, repair, those are like concepts that we talk about in pedagogy a lot, but to see it actually practice was really nice. So thank you so much for those presentations. I think having been on this project with Rahul from the start, one of these questions that we keep asking ourselves and why we actually put this project together, which now I will post to you all, is that we often talk about social responsibility, engaging with state machinery, this idea of architecture having a larger role in the public realm when we're especially studying and when we're young, we have that kind of aspiration. And what I would ask both of you all now is that given that we saw some of the works you have presented, a large part of it was on the side of the private client and engaging with very particular contexts which are right around them. And I'm wondering, as young practices or like as relatively set up emerging practices, the way we like to think of it, do you have an aspiration still to engage with state machinery, especially in the context that you all come from, which are very particular, like the transitions both Sri Lanka and Nepal are facing are particular. And I wonder if that's beaten that aspiration out of you all, or if it still exists, and how you all see your practices doing that, if you do. And if not, what might the barriers be that you all are currently trying to fight with? So that's one part of the question. And then I'll ask you the next one.
Let them answer this first.
Yeah.
It's a complex question. Go ahead. You want to, Sagar or Kosala, whoever?
Right. So, similar to what you've said, I have had a little bit of experience in these fields, but not as having my own firm, but I did like doing earthquake and in habitat and building all of that stuff. And back of my mind, there's always that same old question, okay, we are practicing, studying kind of architecture, but what's the core value of it if you can't provide for more, so that's a thought process that's still in the back of my mind. And then, at one point, we were also thinking like maybe at one point, if we are like financially stable, at one point, we might kind of also relocate certain funds from the company's profit. And then we want to do our own project. Like we want to build like libraries, we want to build schools and all of that stuff. But still we are like open to having these opportunities if things kind of comes by,
Yeah, I think, in our case also, like, to do public projects, do public places, to do, places for people is kind of my dream. But, it's really hard to, with the context, there are like very less number of public projects as such, and as young architects, it's really hard to get into those projects in Sri Lankan context. But really hoping to do something, as Sagar said, if we have funds, we could have done something, but we are, kind of, struggling with the practice as well, with the economic situation. So So that's why, I mean, even if whether it's commercial or private client, I would say the things we have done is kind of eye opener for poor people as well. So where they can think different and do something where from the things they have. So hopefully we are trying to do something in future. We are keep open for that.
Yeah, and like just to add a few, like we in terms of getting like public government projects here in Nepal, there's a lot of bureaucracy that I personally do not want to get involved in. So that's a hassle that I'm keeping myself out, because there are things that you don't want to know. There's the things that you don't want to get even involved with. So having said that, that's something that I'm like taking a back step as of now.
Okay. Kosala, there are two questions. If I may, Ishna, before you go to your second question, there's a question from Kaikobad, a guest who is a very regular guest. So I thank you, Kaikobad, for being here and asking these questions. He asks, as the generations are moving towards the quality of life over the standard of life, how do you convince the client to use unconventional methods? If you can also mention the feedback you're receiving from them while using those. And to add to that, I just want to say in that they are ordinary materials. People want the glitz and the shiny, stuff, which has become the new global image, or had been the new global image. And then there's a second question from Eshan Alam, who also asked this question. I'm going to paraphrase it. How does your approach towards repurposing and adapting material, respond to the current economic crisis? And I think his question is really, do you see the potential of ramping this up? Right now, you're doing it for very small projects, but could we produce larger scale housing using this approach, or could we build larger workspaces using this approach? What are the potential you have sensed, and what's your sense from the feedback that you get from your clients?
So actually, like to convince a client for something like this is the first project is really hard to convince, but I mean, I don't say it's lucky, but with the economic situation, some of the projects wouldn't be done if we didn't come up with that particular concept and show them, okay, you can do this in this kind of a budget. So that was one of the key things we convinced the client, the budget. So for that we found this alternative materials, and then keeping the aesthetics is the kind of a bit tough, but we still try to keep the architecture, spatial progression, and the aesthetics in the project itself. But when you do one, then it's kind of eye opener. Now there are people coming and say, okay, there are things we can do, like a lot of people are asking for these kind of things right now. So it's kind of becoming I don't know whether it's a trend or what, but they see the beauty in this, not ordinary materials, because the final product, which they couldn't imagine, we have created like few examples, which I think, kind of we have done something for that. Of course, as you asked, I think whatever the materials, if we can kind of think, alternative ways of doing things. I think in Sri Lankan context right now, with the economic crisis, the ordinary materials kind of went 3 or 4 times higher within a 6 months time period. So which right now anyone can't afford, but still there are like little opportunities where, there are little things we can take it out, where you don't, say as like ordinary materials, but still we can do something out of that. So we are in a progress of, finding those things and taking them out as a challenge. So that's basically our practice is actually.
Thank you. Ishna, over to you for your second question.
Yeah, I was actually pulling from the chat for the second question, because I think it kind of blended well with the first one as well, which is one, Isaac, I believe, asks, to both practices, how much does Instagram and social media as technology inform ideas that facilitate your respective practices? Does it come in the way, or does it enable your architectural thinking or imagination to expand? And so if public realm and engagement is a little bit precluding in terms of how you imagine it, is social media and this new technology beginning to expand it, or again, limit it, put it into the box, is I think what he's getting at.
Should I go first?
Yeah.
Sorry. No, I think with this Instagram thing and all this social media, it's up to you on how you take it as this opportunity to grow your business. And kind of also, before the social media, there used to be books, right? So I guess it's all a matter of tools on how you use it. Someone can exploit it in a good way or the bad way. And these kind of algorithm will kind of also show you what you have been looking for. So I guess it's a good thing till a way like you use it like properly. And I think it's a great tool for the business to grow. And we have had like a couple of potential projects that were approached via these social media as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree to the same comment. And then again, like one of the positives I saw from social media was the work we do. Like in Sri Lanka, usually the architects were recognized in the capital itself. Even we go to the villages, people doesn't know who architects are. So right now, I know there's a kind of a potential that people see, okay, there are people called architects and they do different kind of buildings, kind of a thing. So in a way, I don't know, we don't get work from those, but in a way, it's good for, the community to, get their things updated. So it's if you, use it good, that's good.
Okay. Great. Ishna, do you have any other questions, or should I just wrap up then?
I think we are
good. Okay. No, thank you. No, this has been a very interesting conversation. I'm glad we had the time for it. And, like I said, you both are you're coming from two different localities. Actually, one is coming from as north in South Asia as you can get, almost aside from Afghanistan, perhaps. And the other is coming from as south as you can get in South Asia. So it's interesting. We've got the two polar ends where the climates are different, the issues are different, but also very interestingly, your trajectories have been very different. I think Kosala his trajectory has been within Sri Lanka, learning from two architects who mentored him and others that he, is being mentored by. And, from a tradition also where starting from the post-independence generation of architects to another whole generation after that, and to this third and fourth generation, I mean, there's a kind of consistency in approach and almost an extending of a very well-articulated tradition within, I think, the Sri Lankan context, the notion of the inside, outside, the responses to climate, the response to materiality and texture. I mean, it's very much in South Asia, we look to Sri Lanka for that as a very clear tradition that you as a community of architects and many others who have come before you or are yet practicing before you, some of who are attending this talk, have created a very robust tradition there. In the context of Nepal, of course, your trajectory, Sagar, has been quite different, but a very interesting one in terms of the struggles you've gone through, the experiences you've gone through. In Nepal, of course, the disjunctures are much greater. Like you said, the past is buried and not really as evident, while the topography and the landscapes of Nepal are yet so much intact. And of course, there are hidden gems in Nepal, like we talked about Karl Prussia, and there are many others who have also worked within the Bhaktapur complex and bringing modernity in the process of conservation and restoration. And, there's just wonderful work that has happened there. And your trajectory is interesting to my mind because, you go to Bali and you've come back and now you're trying to reconcile. I mean, I just love the way both Nepal and Bali are even in the title of your studio. I hope at some point there will be a synthesis. But what's interesting is people often go to the West, or they go to the global North, as is called, and then they come back and they're trying to reconcile European or American approaches with localized ways of doing things, and modernism was a bit of that story. But in your case, you've stayed within the global South. You've gone to Bali, which in many ways is very akin to South Asia, both in the way Hinduism is present there as religion, but also the cultural landscape more broadly. And so you bring a different kind of influence. And of course, Bali has its own approach or its own influences of globalization through tourism, which is another whole challenge and a problem. But it'll just be very interesting to see how your practice progresses, how you reconnect to your early impulses of responding on the ground to earthquake, local materials, and all of that. And I think this reconciliation of the kinds of global influences you bought from Bali, albeit in a completely different formulation, and the reality of the ground in Nepal is obviously the challenge that lies ahead for you. And we really both look forward to seeing how your work evolves. I hope this community of younger architects in South Asia forms into a community and a conversation that becomes ongoing. As you know, we are trying very hard to put all this together as a catalog, so that even all these conversations are captured for you to refer to, and hope it becomes a benchmark of sorts for other future conversations. So with that, I want to thank everyone who attended this session. Thanks again to the South Asia Students Group and Ashna for participating in this panel, and both to Kosala and to Sagar for sharing with us your work and insights. Our next session is going to be on the 18th of February. That will be the 9th session. So it'll be the 17th, 18th lecture. And we are going to hear from a firm called Koeles from Pakistan and Para from Bangladesh. So we are going to now, move to the East and the West from the South and the North. And let's see what appears in these sort of axes. And so thanks again. And thank you for sharing all your work. Thanks. And see you guys on the 18th of February.
Thank you so much, Rahul. And thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.